Hey everyone, it's Monica. Welcome back to Homeschool Voices. Today I'm going to tell you about my #1 most useful homeschool hack. I don't care if your child is 5 or 15, if you do this one thing at least once a week, you are going to have amazing benefits and you'll be super happy. But the best thing about what I'm going to tell you is that it's cheap, it's easy, you don't have to have a PhD in education, anyone can do it. So what is it? It's having your child read aloud at least once a week for 10 minutes. So these benefits apply to 5-year-olds, to 15-year-olds who are actually really great readers. So don't think, oh, my child has been reading really well for a long time. My child reads these huge books and at really fast speed and great retention, and get yourself to thinking that your child doesn't still need work. Your child still needs work. They're not an adult yet, and even adults aren't perfect. The first thing that I'm going to mention is going to apply to a lot of your kids. Not all of them, but you will be surprised because it might be your kid. And this is a complete lack of understanding about punctuation, commas, periods, question marks, exclamation marks. A lot of kids have really no idea what they're for. And when you have your child read aloud, you are going to see what I'm talking about. They will just disregard them like they're not there, like they don't see them. For example, I work with a lot of kids and I like to have them read aloud a lot, even when they're older. And kids regularly ignore commas. So a comma is, we know we use commas in certain formal circumstances, like in a list. I ate apples, bananas, and oranges for breakfast. But we also use commas to pause. I mean, even in the example I just gave you, you're supposed to pause. I ate apples, that's a pause. Bananas, that's a pause. And oranges for breakfast. So when we see a comma and we're reading aloud, we should pause. So there's a connection between reading and understanding the words, the phonics, the grammar when we read and also when we write. If your child doesn't understand it when they read, they're probably not going to use these things appropriately very often when they write. So they're probably going to not put periods, not put commas, be completely confused about where commas should go. So if you read with your child once a week for 10 minutes, and you could do twice a week for 10 minutes or 15. You can alternate, you read and they read, but at least once a week for 10 minutes. You're gonna notice, and you're bit by bit in a very gentle way, a very brief way, correct them and say, that's a comma there. This is how we read it when there's a comma. You quickly read it the right way and then have them copy. And if you understand how it should be read, you understand when you want to write something, when you want to communicate an idea in the written form rather than speaking like I am speaking to you right now, but in the written form, and you want people to pause or to show them that you have completed a thought, you need to put a period when you've completed a thought. When you want to show people that you're asking a question, you need to have a question mark. So the two work together. The next area of weakness that most people who try this are going to uncover is a very poor understanding of phonics. This goes for my kids too. I didn't teach them in a very thorough way. For my kids, it was more their personalities. They just fought me left and right. So I taught them to read using a book called The Ordinary Parent's Guide to Reading. And bit by bit over the years, I've been teaching them the phonics that they are lacking. And I did that certainly not because I knew, not because I had a great education as a kid, but because I stumbled upon this book called Uncovering the Logic of English, and it's very digestible, it's easily read, you don't have to read it all and memorize it at first. Take it in chunks, and bit by bit you'll learn things, and bit by bit you'll teach your children things. For most kids, this will work pretty well. What happens is a kid will encounter a word, and they will either look to you, so they'll be reading and they'll look up at you and they'll say, how do I pronounce that? If they had the tools they needed, and by tools I mean if they knew the rules of the English language, we call that phonics. If they knew those rules, they would attempt to pronounce that word. They would feel pretty confident, maybe not perfectly confident, but pretty confident. When they don't even attempt it, it's because they don't have the tools. Okay, so it's okay. We don't need to be perfect all at once. You as a teacher don't even need to know it all at once. Maybe you write down 2 or 3 of the words that they have trouble with. Maybe you don't know either. You really are not sure because it's sort of weird. And then you get that book and you try to look through the book and find one of the rules that applies, and you could say, oh, this is the rule that that tells us how we pronounce this word, right? So you don't even have to really explain it in the moment. You can tell them what the word is, and then later on you can go through 2 or 3 words and explain the rules that apply to those words. So you don't even really have to know what you're doing in the moment, but it will point out where those gaps are in your child's phonics education. And it's super, a lot of people downplay phonics. Phonics makes it so that kids and adults alike can confidently and accurately sound out unfamiliar words. So you're going to find those gaps when your child reads aloud. Of course, an obvious one is going to be vocabulary. So you just very briefly give a definition. Don't belabor it, don't be exhausting, but just briefly give them a definition and move on. And because it was in context and because they didn't know, they'll be more interested in storing that information because it will just matter a little more than if it was just a list of words that they had to memorize the definitions to. Another benefit of reading out loud is really interesting. So what I've been doing with my kids is I will read and then they'll read and then I'll read and they'll read. And I try to encourage them to read books that they maybe would not have picked for themselves, but I do think that they will like. And the cool benefit of this is that a lot of times they will pick up that book even outside of read aloud time. So for example, yesterday I read with my son, we took turns, and today he's downstairs reading this book on his own, and every time I come down the stairs, it's Mom, did you know this? And Mom, did you know that? So it's a good way to get your kids to be a little more open to reading a book that they may not have been interested in. And ideally, we want our kids to, in their minds, voluntarily decide or to read a book or pick a book. That way, they will be much, much more receptive to the information and much more likely to retain that information. I just want to emphasize one more time the importance, no matter how old your kid is or how great a reader that you think they are, a lot of times kids will just mispronounce things and they'll just skip over them, and they'll do it for years and they'll really not ever learn that word properly. For example, we were reading in our little class that we have in the park, and my son read the word soldier, but you know it's S-O-L-D-I-E-R, so he read it soldier, I think. He pronounced the L. You're not supposed to. I don't even know the rule behind it, to tell you the truth. I haven't got around to looking it up, but I corrected him. It's a common word. He can actually just memorize that word, and if I have time, I will look up the reasoning behind it. If you know, tell me in the comments below so I can tell him. But it's things like that. Like, I don't want my 14-year-old to turn into a 16-year-old that encounters the word soldier and reads it soldier. You will catch these things, and this kid reads easily twice as fast as I do, and that is not an exaggeration. I've actually tested my reading speed and his reading speed. He retains pretty much everything if he's interested in the book. So he's not a bad reader. He's not a poor reader. He can even read very quickly out loud. But even he has some gaps. Even he doesn't know everything, and it's helpful even for him. I hope you're excited. I hope that you see the benefits of reading aloud. And before you go off and you have your child read aloud, I just want to give you one word of caution. And that is not to try to make every reading session perfect and to correct your child on every single thing. If you do that, you will turn something that should be reasonably pleasant into something that is pretty torturous. You will make your child dread it, and you may make your child hate reading. So don't do that. Just correct 2 or 3 things, okay, maybe 4 or 5. It depends on your kid's personality. Some kids are really sensitive. Some kids make a lot of mistakes. So if your kid is making 2 mistakes a sentence, you need to be careful, because you'll really discourage them if you correct every single thing. So you got to gauge your kid's personality. Trust the process. You're gonna show improvement over time. Okay, you do not have to correct every single thing, and if you do, you will have the opposite result. You will really mess things up. Okay, so be judicious, read your child, and then just make sure that you're not overdoing the corrections. So pick stuff, like maybe if your child does not really understand punctuation, start with that. Just teach them to just do periods. Just don't worry about question marks or commas so much. Ignore it as best you can unless it really makes your skin crawl. Just have them, when they see a period, be like, oh, that was a period there. Why don't you read it again? Make it sound like there's a period there. If they don't know what you're talking about, give them an example. And then if it gets to be tiring, even during one session, only focusing on periods, let it go for the rest of the time. Next time you can do it again. And once those periods are good, now you can start working on commas, and little bit by little bit. The most important key to success with reading aloud is consistency and positivity. So try to be as positive as possible and try to be consistent. At least once a week, every week, have your children read aloud. If you have any thoughts, opinions, ideas, please let me know in the comments below. I love the discussion. If you like this video, please click thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, please click subscribe and the notification bell next to it. In the meantime, happy homeschooling and have a great day.